Hey guys, welcome back to Northframe. And today's story, let's forget palace dramas. Forget Game of Thrones. What I'm about to tell you makes those look like a middle school talent show. Picture this. The queen of 100-year-old beauty empire, a daughter who never felt loved, a photographer who made a career out of selling emotional support to rich women, and because of France loves chaos, a sitting president. Now, toss them all into one giant inheritance battle where billions of dollars are on the line. That's right, this isn't Netflix fiction, this is real life. A daughter turning on her mother, a boy toy almost promoted to eldest son, and the president, yes, an actual president, dragged down like a contestant booted off Survivor. Nope, not fiction. This is the real life inheritance war of the L'Oreal dynasty. By the end of 2023, Forbes made it official. François Bettencourt Meyers, the current head of L'Oreal, became the first woman in history with a net worth topping $100 billion. She overtook the BMW heiress, left Walmart's matriarch in the dust, and claimed the crown of richest woman alive. Her success sounds glamorous, but here's the kicker. If she hadn't spent 8 years locked in a courtroom cage match with her own mother, she would have crossed the $100 billion line years earlier. That legal war didn't just tear apart their family. It dragged L'Oreal into scandals over tax evasion, shady politician donations, and even toppled a French president. You really can make this stuff up. We all know the slogan.
You're worth it.
L'Oreal sells everything: skincare, makeup, shampoo, perfume. And let's be honest, if you have skin, they're trying to sell you something. But the empire didn't start as a glamorous empire. Nope. It began in 1909 with a young chemist named Eugene Schuller, hunched over his kitchen table, messing with chemicals like a DIY Walter White. Except instead of meth, he cooked up hair dye. Back then, women had two awful choices: pay through the nurse at a salon to fry your skull with toxic bleach, or smear coffee grounds and beet juice on your head and hope for the best. Eugene looked at that and thought, absolutely not. After thousands of experiments, he finally cracked the formula: safe, non-fading, and cheap enough that regular women could afford it. The stuff was an instant hit. Saloons couldn't keep it in stock. And then, enter Marilyn Monroe. She turned blonde hair into cultural obsession, and Eugene's dye went from popular to untouchable monopoly. To seal the deal, he rebranded the company as L'Oréal Paris. From a kitchen experiment to the world's beauty empire, it all started with a bottle of hair dye. Eugene's career was booming, but his personal life could have been ripped straight out of a tragic romance novel. He married his childhood sweetheart, a graceful pianist who wasn't just talented on stage. During World War I, she volunteered for the front lines and earned 5 medals for bravery. Talk about hardcore. But fate is cruel. When their daughter Lillian was just 5 years old, her mother died of tuberculosis. Eugene was devastated. From that point on, every ounce of love, guilt, and ambition he had was poured into Lillian. She wasn't just raised like a daughter, she was raised like royalty. Silk dresses, elite education, the works. By age 15, while other teenagers were sneaking out to parties, Lillian was sitting in boardrooms, shadowing her father. She learned everything: how to design labels, how to manage secret product formulas, how to negotiate with ruthless businessmen twice her age. Eugene wasn't just grooming an heir, he was building a fortress to protect her future. And he was paranoid, in a genius way. Before his death, Eugene left behind what was essentially a business booby trap. He warned that if the French government ever tried to nationalize L'Oréal, the family should immediately sell 29.6% of the company to Swiss food giant Nestlé. Why Nestlé? Because Switzerland loves neutrality almost as much as it loves chocolate. If Nestlé became the second largest shareholder, any attempt at nationalization would drag Switzerland into the fight. And France, no matter how bold, wasn't about to start a corporate war with the Swiss. Sure enough, 6 years after Eugene's death, France tried to swoop in. But his plan worked perfectly. L'Oreal didn't just survive, it thrived, shielded by Nestle's massive corporate umbrella. So when people say Eugene built L'Oreal, it wasn't just the hair dye, it was also his 4D chess game of corporate survival. The man didn't just leave his daughter an empire, he left her a playbook on how to keep it. So, yes, L'Oreal wasn't just built on chemistry, it was built on strategy, paranoia, and the kind of fatherly love that comes with a $1 billion safety net. By the time Eugene was gone, the empire had roots so deep it would outline wars, governments, and scandals. And then came Lillian. In 1957, at just 35 years old, she officially inherited her father's throne, holding 31% of L'Oreal's shares, instantly making her one of the richest women in France. Her father had left her one golden rule: don't sweat the small stuff, but when it comes to the big stuff, never flinch. Lillian followed it to the letter. She let CEOs handle the boring daily grind, while she focused on empire building. Acquisitions, global expansions, big picture moves. And wow, did she deliver? Within a few years, L'Oreal gobbled up some of the biggest names in beauty: Lancome, Yves Saint Laurent, Armani, not to mention affordable brands like Garnier and NYX, plus USC, a household name in China. Lillian didn't just buy brands, she redefined the market. She broke down the old walls between luxury and drugstore cosmetics, ensuring that whether you had $10 or $1,000, L'Oreal had something for you. That balance between making teenage girls feel glamorous and keeping billionaires hooked on 500 anti-aging creams was Lillian's genius. And it worked. On paper, Lillian's life looked perfect. In 1950, at just 28, she married André Betancourt, a rising star in French politics. The press adored them. The photogenic elite stopped France's answer to the Canadas. André's career soared. He became a cabinet minister, rubbed elbows with presidents, even traveled with Lillian to China, shaking hands with Mao and Zhou Enlai. For L'Oreal, this was priceless PR, instant credibility in international markets. They weren't just a beauty brand anymore, they were global. But behind the glossy magazine covers, things were icy. Let's just say, André's romantic interest didn't exactly point towards his wife. Whispers in Parisian political circles hinted that André played for the other team. The marriage, according to Lillian's herself, was less about passion and more about convenience. We were more like friends or business partners. And after their daughter, Françoise, better known as Little Betancourt, was born, André basically clocked out. Mission accomplished, he moved out of the bedroom faster than you can say arranged marriage. And that separation, it lasted more than 50 years, half a century of living under the same roof, but not as husband and wife. Then again, when your mansion is the size of Versailles, you can go weeks without bumping into your spouse in the hallway. So while the world saw Lillian as this glamorous French first lady, the reality was far less romantic. She was, in essence, a billionaire trapped in a loveless marriage, a glided cage with very expensive wallpaper. And if you think the marriage drama was rough, wait until you hear about the mother-daughter dynamic. Lillian didn't just withhold affection from her husband. She wasn't exactly warm to her only child either. From the start, she treated little Françoise like a constant disappointment. Lillian, the glamorous, elegant socialite, looked at her daughter and saw the opposite. In her eyes, Françoise was too short, too plain, too timid, not the kind of daughter you parrot at Paris Fashion Week. At parties, Lillian would casually jab, "You're nothing like me. You're far too ordinary." Brutal. Growing up in a mansion full of servants, but starved of maternal love, Françoise became increasingly quiet, reserved, almost invisible, a ghost in her own family. Eventually, she found some stability in marriage, wedding Jean-Pierre, a senior L'Oreal executive. But even that choice sparked conflict. She converted to Judaism after the wedding. For Lillian, a devout Catholic, this wasn't just unconventional, it was betrayal. And yet, despite the bitterness, Lillian still had to face reality. Family shares couldn't just vanish outside the bloodline. So, begrudgingly, she named Françoise her heir. But the cracks in their relationship, they were already canyon deep. While André was off living his own double life, Lillian was hardly a saint herself. She floated through Parisian high society, dabbling in flings and whispers. But nothing ever stuck. Then, in the late 1990s, at a glamorous cocktail party, she met the man who would flip her world upside down, photographer François-Marie Benier. Benier for short. And Benier knew how to make an entrance. His opening line, "When I was 16, I was Salvador Dali's lover." Yeah, that was his icebreaker. Forget, "Hi, what's your sign?" This guy went straight for, "I used to sleep with this surrealist legend." It was bold, maybe desperate, but for Lillian, it worked. See, Benier wasn't really known for his photography. He was known for marketing himself. He built a career hovering around the famous, name-dropping his way into galleries and dinner parties until people assumed he must be important. Over time, he perfected his hustle. He wasn't selling photos, he was selling companionship. Here's his business model in a nutshell. Target the wealthy and lonely. Provide emotional value. Dinner dates, shopping trips, vacations, late night heart-to-hearts, you name it. Sometimes he played the role of best friend. Sometimes a muse. Sometimes just a warm body at a cold gala table. Whatever the client needed, he became. And Lillian, despite her billions, was lonely. The richest woman in France craved exactly what Benier specialized in: attention, validation, someone to remind her she was more than just a walking trust fund. It was intoxicating. His words were like poison wrapped in honey, exactly what she didn't know she'd been starving for. Within months, Benier wasn't just a guest in her home. He was practically a second landlord at the Bettencourt mansion. To the staff, it felt like a hostile takeover. One day, he's a guest. The next, he's rearranging closets and acting like the co-owner of Versailles 2.0. By the time he met Lillian, Benier was pushing 60. His looks had faded, but his game sharper than ever. He'd been perfecting his wealth extraction skills for decades, and walking into Lillian's life was like a shark spotting an injured seal. She was vulnerable, neglected by her husband, at odds with her daughter, and craving validation. For Benier, this wasn't seduction. It was business as usual. Landing the richest woman in France, for him, it was just another day at the office. Unlike other photographers who always framed Lillian as the cold, untouchable Iron Queen, Benier had a different pitch. "You're not just a CEO, you're a woman." He swapped her stiff suits for soft striped shirts, loosened her perfect bun into natural curls, wiped away layers of makeup, and told her, "Your smile is the best cosmetic, don't hide it." In the golden glow of sunset, his lens captured her not as the richest woman in France, but as someone radiant, almost youthful. When she looked at those photos, she didn't see Madame L'Oreal. She saw herself, seen, appreciated, even desired, and that was enough to hook her completely. It didn't take long before Benier stopped acting like a guest and started acting like, well, a co-owner of Versailles 2.0. First came the wardrobe overhaul. Out went Lillian's decades of haute couture classics. In came Benier's younger, fresher pigs. Then he redecorated entire wings of the mansion to suit his taste. Even her lipstick shade became subject to his approval, as if he were her personal stylist, therapist, and life coach rolled into one. From the outside, it looked absurd. The richest woman in France letting a mid-tier photographer dictate her outfits and interior design. But for Lillian, Benier's audacity felt strangely familiar, like the fearless authority of her father, Eugene. He wasn't just rearranging her furniture, he was rearranging her sense of self. And in her eyes, there wasn't control, there was charisma. And here's the part that really makes jaws drop. Monsieur Bettencourt, Lillian's actual husband, wasn't furious about his wife's not-so-secret companion. He wasn't even annoyed. In fact, he practically endorsed the arrangement. In his eyes, Benier was doing what teams of psychiatrists, doctors, and prescription pills had failed to do. He put a smile back on Lillian's face. Why argue with results? So instead of shutting it down, he leaned in. The Bettencourt family soon became an unofficial trio, And yes, there are actual photographs of Lillian, her husband, and her best friend Benier posing together at events, like the world's strangest reality show, Keeping Up with the Billionaires. Paris high society was eating it up. But inside the Bettencourt mansion, the air grew heavy. Servants whispered in corridors, wondering when this house guest would overstep. The butler, biding his time, quietly plotting ways to expose Benier's secrets. Claire, the family accountant, started photocopying bank statements and checks, receipts that told a very different story. Meanwhile, on the far side of the estate, the overlooked daughter, Françoise, the so-called disappointing heir, watched from the shadows. For years, her mother had starved her of affection, but now she was forced to watch billions in jewels, art, and influence showered on a stranger with a camera. Every cold glance from her mother, every cutting remark, suddenly had context. Love and fortune had been reverted to an outsider. And just like that, the cracks in this glamorous empire began to spread. The champagne still flowed, the soirées still sparkled, but beneath the chandeliers, the stage was being set for one of the most outrageous family feuds France had ever seen. The numbers told a story sharper than any sword. Forensic accountant Claire laid their receipts bare. In just 10 years, Lillian had lavished François-Marie Benier with an eye-watering 917 million euros. That's not a typo, nearly €1 billion. To put it in perspective, that's more than Lillian had ever spent on her only daughter, Françoise, or her grandchildren combined. Think about that for a second. Every luxury, every art collection, every diamond necklace, all funneled to a man whose main qualification was being available. Françoise stared at the records, and her emotions spiraled into toxic cocktail of rage and heartbreak. Here was the proof of what she had always felt but never quantified. Her mother's love, her approval, even her fortune had been denied to her but gifted freely to a stranger. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. For decades, she had lived under the shadow of being not enough, not elegant enough, not beautiful enough, not charismatic enough, and now the receipts showed her replacement, a silver-haired opportunist with a camera and a script. But where pain festers, resolve is born. Françoise wiped her tears, squared her shoulders, and made her choice. She would no longer be the silent, overlooked heir. Together with Claire, the loyal accountant who had risked everything to preserve the evidence, Françoise prepared to pull the mask off Benier once and for all. And thus, the stage lights shifted. The quiet whispers of betrayal were about to erupt into a full-blown family war, complete with lawyers, boardrooms, and front-page headlines. The Bettencourt drama was no longer a private embarrassment. It was about to become France's juiciest scandal. In November of that same year, André Bettencourt, the political heavyweight, Lillian's husband of nearly 6 decades, passed away at 88. His death sent a shockwave through the family estate. The stabilizing anchor of the household was gone, and suddenly all eyes turned to Benier. The rumor mill kicked into overdrive. Whispers spread like wildfire across Parisian salons. Benier's going to secure his position. Servants claimed he had even hinted, brazenly, in the mansion itself, that Lillian should adopt him as her son. Yes, you heard that right. A 60-something man auditioning for the role of eldest child. And this wasn't just gossip fodder, it was a direct legal threat. If Benier became Lillian's adopted son, he wouldn't just be a house guest with a Cartier gift habit, he'd be a full-fledged heir. That would effectively shoo Françoise and her 2 sons out of the inheritance line. Overnight, the companion could leapfrog bloodlines and claim the empire for himself. Françoise knew the stakes. This wasn't just about family pride anymore. This was existential. If she didn't act now, she and her children would become footnotes in the very empire her grandfather had built. She rallied her husband, her legal team, and friendly board members, pushing to force her mother to transfer her shares before the unimaginable happened. But Lillian wasn't standing alone in her guilty corner. Behind her stood two formidable allies, the CEO of L'Oreal and Nestle, the multinational giant holding nearly a third of the company. Together, they blocked Francois' motion. And just like that, the gloves came off. Whatever remained of mother and daughter dissolved. The Bettencourt drama was no longer a family squabble. It was open war, with billions at stake, and the fate of one of the world's biggest beauty empires hanging in the balance. Benier, emboldened by his growing influence, decided to secure the mansion the way a mob boss secured turf. He launched an internal purge. Longtime servants were forced to declare loyalty or pack their bags. Gardeners, maids, even the butler, all were dragged into a climate of paranoia where gossip was weaponized and betrayal was rewarded. The Bettencourt estate still sparkled with chandeliers and marble floors, but beneath the glitter, it felt more like a Cold War bunker. But power plays often create blind spots. The butler, quiet, dutiful, invisible, had seen enough. He knew he couldn't confront Benier directly, but he could gather ammunition. Channeling his inner James Bond, he slipped a tiny recorder into his serving cart. Every time he wheeled champagne or canapes into the sitting room, the card was listening. For a month, he captured hours of conversation, hoping for juicy gossip about Benier's schemes. Instead, he stumbled onto something far bigger, a scandal that reached beyond the mansion walls and straight into the Élysée Palace. The tapes reveal Lillian Bettencourt in long, casual chats with none other than Nicolas Sarkozy, the president of France. And they weren't talking about hair products. They discussed offshore accounts. Over 40 of them, holding billions of euros hidden safely away from French tax authorities. Sarkozy, the supposed guardian of the Republic, wasn't just aware, he was her shield. Even more explosive, the recordings hinted that during Sarkozy's 2007 and 2012 election campaigns, his war chest had blown past the legal spending cap. Where did the extra millions come from? You guessed it, from Lillian's deep pockets, funneled quietly into the machinery of French politics. Compared to this, the boy toy photographer drama was tabloid fluff. This wasn't just a family embarrassment, it was the unveiling of France's dirtiest open secret, the entanglement of billionaires and presidents. L'Oreal wasn't just selling beauty products anymore, it was sitting at the center of a political powder keg. Meanwhile, Benier's appetite only grew more monstrous. It was no longer about paintings and pearls. He was siphoning yachts, villas, even castles into his orbit. To him, Lillian's bank accounts was a bottomless ATM that spat out treasures of demand. Then came the boldest move yet. He convinced Lillian to take out a 260 million euros life insurance policy, naming him, and only him, as the sole beneficiary. Forget companionship, this was succession planning by con artistry. If it stirred, Francois' future wasn't just in jeopardy, it was obliterated. But Benier's wasn't done. His gaze shifted to Lillian's prized possession, a private island in the Seychelles. Her tropical Eden. When Francoise learned her mother was actually considering signing it over to Benier, something inside her snapped. The anger of a lifetime of neglect fused with the terror of losing everything her grandfather had built. Enough was enough. This time Francoise came armed. She marched into the boardroom not with accusations, but with evidence. The butler's secret tapes, those late-night conversations between Lillian and Sarkozy, were her smoking gun. They showed her mother's judgment wasn't just compromised by a manipulative companion. It had spiraled into behavior that endangered the company and its shareholders. The framing was brilliant. This wasn't about a family feud anymore. It was about governance, responsibility, and the stability of a multinational giant. By dragging the five from the saloon to the boardroom, Francois turned what had been dismissed as gossip into a corporate and political crisis. And in that moment, the Bettencourt war leveled up. It was no longer just a tug of war between mother, daughter, and a scheming lover. It was now a battle fought on three fronts: family, corporate, and national politics. with stakes high enough to topple presidents. Francoise thought the tapes were her checkmate. What she didn't expect was that her move would blow the entire chessboard off the table. The Butler's recordings didn't just expose Banier's manipulation, they detonate a political earthquake. Offshore accounts, billions hidden from French tax authorities, campaign donations funneled straight into Sarkozy's election. It was less family scandal and more House of Cards French edition. And the media? They smelled blood like sharks in open water. Headlines screamed betrayal and corruption. Protesters took to the street. Sarkozy's government, once wrapped in an iron curtain of respectability, was suddenly naked in front of the world, and it wasn't a flattering sight. Meanwhile, the collateral damage hit home. L'Oreal's stock nosedived. Billions of euros evaporated in days, leaving shareholders in full panic mode. Francoise had meant to corner her mother, but instead she almost tanked the family empire. Talk about winning the battle and nearly losing the war. To make matters worse, Sarkozy, her mother's so-called protector, was already politically bankrupt. He'd burned through Lilian's millions, lost his re-election, and transformed overnight from presidential shield to dead weight. Imagine betting everything on a horse, only to watch it drop dead at the starting line. That's what Sarkozy's had become for the betting courts. Backed into a corner, Francoise played her final card: medicine. She brought in the best doctors in France, and their diagnosis was damning. Lilian was suffering from dementia, compounding by near total hearing loss. In legal terms, that meant she was no longer competent to make decisions. With that, Francoise petitioned the court and won. Overnight, she became her mother's legal guardian. In a symbolic flourish, Lilian's trembling signature transferred authority to her daughter. The torch had been passed, not through affection or trust, but by medical decree and judicial stamp. L'Oreal at last was under Francois' control. But make no mistake, this was no fairy tale coronation. It was a hostile takeover conducted in hospital gowns and courtrooms, with the side of family tragedy for a garnish. Once Francois secured control, her first order of business was spring cleaning, and not the kind with feather dusters. She needed to scrub away decades of political crime clinging to her mother's empire. Her lawyers went to work, reframing Lilian's not as a calculating billionaire, but as a vulnerable elderly woman manipulated by power-hungry politicians. The same cash transfers that once screamed corruption were rebranded as a tragic tale of elder fraud. Suddenly, the scandal wasn't L'Oreal buying presidents. It was poor grandma tricked by slick-taking politicians. And it worked. The fallout landed squarely on Sarkozy. In 2021, the once pro-president of France was convicted of illegal campaign financing and sentenced to a year in prison. No guillotine this time, but in terms of humiliation, brutal. He went from president of the republic to punchline of the republic. Imagine being remembered less for your policies and more as the first French president with a criminal record. That's legacy, folks. With politics mopped up, Francois turned to unfinished business: Bannier. In 2015, he was dragged into court on charges of abuse of weakness. Prosecutors rolled out a 20-page list of gifts and transfers worth over €1 billion. Former staff testified to his predatory behavior, and the family accountant Claire delivered the knockout blow. Detailed how Bannier micromanaged Lilian's finances for years. The verdict? Guilty. Bannier were sentenced to 2.5 years in prison and ordered to pay back €158 million. The art word, visionary, was officially rebranded as a con man with an expensive taste for yachts and grandmothers. On paper, the palace drama seemed to close here. The dutiful daughter victorious, the playboy companion disgraced, and the family empire restored. But as we'll see, in true Bettencourt fashion, even this ending had a plot twist waiting in the wings. But here's the thing about dynastic dramas: they never end where you think they will. Just when Francoise thought she had finally slain the dragon, Out popped a scroll from the past. Back in 2007, long before any doctor declared her incompetent, Lillian had quietly signed a will. In it, she gifted Billionaire not only €1 billion worth of assets, but also her beloved private island in the Seychelles. Her reasoning? He made me feel alive again. Forget pearls of wisdom. This was pearls and yachts wrapped in a bow. The revelation flipped the script one last time. Françoise could rage, but she couldn't rewrite history. The will was airtight. Armed with this document, Benier appealed and walked free. His prison sentence was reduced to probation, his massive fine slashed, and he left court not as a disgraced parasite, but as a billionaire playboy with beachfront property. Talk about failing upward. In 2017, Lillian passed away. Mother and daughter shared a fragile reconciliation at the very end, but the damage was done. Françoise inherited the empire, becoming the world's richest woman. Banier, the companion, strolled away with a fortune and his tropical island. And Sarkozy, he was left humiliated, forever branded the first French president with a criminal record. A cautionary tale in a designer suit. In the end, the Benacar saga wasn't about beauty creams or boardrooms. It was about what happens when money, power, and loneliness mixed into one toxic cocktail. No one escaped clean. The heiress won the crown, but lost decades of peace. The gigolo walked off rich, but infamous. And the president, he lost everything except the punchlines. People say HBO's Succession was the sharp family drama of our time. Maybe, but this French version had higher stakes, a real indictment, and way better hair products. And the best part? No scriptwriters, just reality, raw and ruthless. So next time you hear L'Oreal slogan, because you're worth it, remember this story. Sometimes being worth it comes with a price tag you can't wash off. If you thought today's story was wild enough to put Succession to shame, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and stick around, because trust me, the next episode, it's going to be even messier. It was Noir Frame, and I'm gonna see you on the next one. Bye.